This is Kelly, and you're watching Reading Between the Legs. This is honest talk on sex, health, and soul. So first thing I want to do is give a huge shout out to Natalie J. LaRue. She is the artist that designed my logo and the artwork on my website and also the artwork I'm using for social media. So thank you, Natalie. Her website can be found below, and I also have a link on my website. You can also find her on Facebook at Studio 87. She is awesome. I don't know what I would have done without her because her artwork is perfect. Second thing, I want to give a big shout out to my friend Banu because check this out. Here, I'm going to make sure you can see it. Oh, there we go. Yep, those are all vaginas. It's awesome. It's like the coolest mug I own now. I'm so excited about it. So thanks, Banu. The period, flow, ant flow, my cycle, the rag, that time of the month, menstruation, which is really like the, technical word for it. So I know I talked about an embarrassing story about my period before in the last episode, and I hear them all the time. I have 40-some-year-old patients that tell me about how their periods are so horrible and heavy that they are having accidents at work or in the middle of the night. And we don't talk about it a lot, except, some people don't even talk to their healthcare providers about it because it's looked at as so gross. Even some cultures look at it as unholy or unclean. But guess what? Most of us women have a period or have had one at some point. It's not a new thing. It's perfectly normal and healthy to have one, and actually not having one or a sudden change can be a huge sign of disease, which I'll address here in just a little bit. So huge cultural differences, and I'm totally okay with that. No culture is wrong. I may not always understand why certain beliefs are the way they are. But I do want to share. So I saw this documentary called Period End of Sentence. It was actually about these girls in this area in India that were missing school because they didn't have access to sanitary napkins or any other kind of device to cleanly collect the menstrual blood. So they were missing school. Some even just completely stopped going to school after they started their periods. And some of these girls never even had heard of a pad before. In this area in India, there was a huge taboo around the menstrual cycle. And actually, this isn't just the only country. I know of lots of countries where it's just taboo, even here sometimes in the United States. But this focused mainly just on India. So the cool thing about this documentary, and I think this is why you'll really enjoy it, is that this man actually made a device and taught other women how to use the device that could make sanitary napkins easily, and they were affordable to people all over this area. And actually it was very cool because it provided jobs to some women that didn't have money or didn't have their own money. So they learned how to make the sanitary pads, and now they could make them and sell them and make some money for themselves. So super cool. That's just a very short synopsis. I really think you'd enjoy it. It's on Netflix. Like I said, it's called Period End of Sentence. They also have a website called thepadproject.org. So check it out. It's very cool. So my period started around age 12, I think. I don't really remember my first period, but I do remember that it was horrible all the time. It was super heavy, so painful. I would spend 3 or 4 days probably with my heating pad, popping Midol like crazy, ibuprofen. I would go to sleep in a super tampon and an overnight, like one of those huge overnight pads that looks like, the pads you buy for urinary incontinence. And I would still be leaking through, and oh my gosh, it was just horrible. My mood swings were terrible, which my husband might say aren't much better now, but whatever. And I just thought all of this was normal. I thought it was normal to be miserable. I had seen other girls at school and heard that other girls were having problems or that they were heavy all the time. but I also knew a bunch of girls that never had a problem, or at least I didn't hear about it. So finally, around the age 17, I think, I got on birth control pills, mainly to help with this terrible, heavy cycle. It did help a little bit with how heavy things were, a little bit with the pain, but it definitely could have been better. I was still bleeding for like 7 or 8 days every month, leaking through pads and tampons and changing stuff every hour. I remember in middle school, like running from class to class because I'd have to stop in the bathroom between each period to change whatever it was that day. Same in high school, even. Actually, it didn't really change for a long time. It wasn't until I moved to Indianapolis from my small town in Indiana to go to college at IU. And I found this amazing nurse practitioner. And she finally sat down, had a long conversation about my terrible periods, and had some suggestions for me. Excuse me, sorry. So we adjusted the pills I was on, and I think things were much better for 2 or 3 years. I wasn't missing class. I wasn't missing work. Things were just so much better. I did start like having some spotting in between my periods, which can be normal, but shouldn't happen for more than a couple months in a row. It's also called breakthrough bleeding. You may have heard that from your physician before, your nurse practitioner. So we changed to the NuvaRing for about a year. I didn't have much more luck with that. I was still having breakthrough bleeding, and apparently my mood swings were worse than they had ever been. So around that time, my mom was actually diagnosed with breast cancer again. I don't remember. I think this was the second time. So I was kind of scared about using hormones, and I thought, let's just get me all the way off of hormones, see if that will help. Maybe my periods will be better since I've been on hormones for so long. So I actually tried, but I did not want to get pregnant. So I actually tried an IUD that's called the Paragard. So the Paragard's a copper-only IUD, and it's good for 10 years, actually, which is fantastic for some people. It was the worst thing I ever did to myself, ever. The worst bleeding I ever had. I was bleeding for up to 10 days. Worst cramping I had ever had. I was missing work, missing class. It was just not a good option for me at all. So I sat down with my nurse practitioner, who was awesome. She actually doesn't even know. I think I convinced her to put it in, which she did not think it was the best idea. But we talked about all of my risks with all different birth controls, what she thought would help the most. And since I had already had the Paragard IUD, she actually suggested a different IUD, which is called the Mirena. So the Mirena is progesterone only. It's good for 5 years. And it's actually FDA approved for heavy bleeding. So people that don't even need it for contraception, we can use it for people with heavy bleeding, which I think is awesome. So life-changing for me. I have no cramps anymore. I have very light bleeding, maybe 2 days. I mean, there was an adjustment period. My body took 3 or 4 months of I had random kind of spotting and bleeding here and there, but it was totally worth it. I wish this thing was good for 20 years. But I promise you, I will be taking this out and putting another one in because it has changed my life forever. So I bet you're wondering, why is she talking so much about her period? It's normal. That's why. I want to work to normalize this because it's something most of us women have to deal with at one point or the other. I talk to my patients about it when I see them, and I ask them how long it is, how heavy is it? Do you have pain? Has it changed recently? And some of my patients look at me like I'm kind of crazy. Or they say, I've never had someone ask me this before. Well, we need to talk about it because it's not always normal. Maybe it's something we need to look into, or maybe they're scared or embarrassed to bring it up to their provider when it could mean, hey, we need to do an ultrasound or we need to check some levels of things because there's so many different normals and there are a lot of abnormals as well. So periods can be heavy, they can be light, both normal. They can be painful or not. Once again, both normal. They can last anywhere from 3 to 10 days. A woman's full cycle can be anywhere from 24 to 35 days long. And I mean, like the length between periods can be that long. Some women have very irregular cycles. They skip months, or they have lots of bleeding and then they don't bleed for a long time. Some people, it's totally normal not to have a period at all. There are a lot of reasons out there, actually, that women just do not have a menstrual cycle. So all of these variations can either be normal or they can be caused by hormone imbalances, bleeding disorders, diabetes, thyroid disease, weight changes, like extreme weight changes, too much or no exercise at all. Those are just a few things that can be going on in the body. Really painful or heavy periods, especially if it just happened or it's just recent, can be caused by endometriosis, which we can talk about sometime later if anybody wants me to, because I know a lot of women struggle with it, and it's a horrible, horrible thing to have to deal with. The other thing is uterine fibroids can cause very heavy and painful bleeding. And actually, uterine cancer, one of the first signs is irregular bleeding. So another thing that can cause all of these problems is perimenopause. So menopause, I will definitely have a whole episode about, because I know that actually a lot of my audience is in their 40s, perimenopausal. So menopause average age is 51. Perimenopause can happen for up to 10 years before that. They can have very irregular cycles, heavy, light, lots of changes during that time. We will address it at another point. But my big point to all of you right now is that any kind of drastic change, you need to talk to your doctor. It could be absolutely nothing. And actually, I don't even start doing lab work usually unless we've had a full 3 months of something totally weird. So no cycle at all for 3 months, or really heavy bleeding all of a sudden for 3 months. But it really says a lot about your overall health, just like your blood pressure, your heart rate do. There's a lot of lab work that I order on a normal basis just to check something out, and usually it ends up being absolutely nothing. You know, stress is one of the things that I think most of us look at as, well, our body doesn't react to that, but your body has a huge stress response, whether it's physical or a mental stress response. So sometimes it just has to do with stress or a huge change in life, but it's totally worth looking into, because there are definitely things that you can prevent if you take a look into all of that. So there is a question I want to address that I got from an old coworker of mine. I'm going to read it just because I want to make sure I hit all the questions she had for me so you can hear them. Kelly, I've heard a lot about using organic products or using a reusable cup or the discs can help with cramping and overall length or how heavy your period is. Is there any truth to this? I have the copper IUD, and 3 years later, it is still so heavy, and I use almost 2 boxes of tampons in a month. Oh my gosh, girl. I've been looking for anything to cut down on costs, make less waste, and find any way to help how much I'm bleeding. Because it's crazy. Like, bleed through a super tampon in 30 minutes crazy, and it lasts almost 2 weeks sometimes. I chose the copper IUD because of the lack of hormones, because my mom died of breast cancer. I have also heard that using an IUD with hormones isn't good for someone in my position, but I've also heard it's fine. I don't know whose advice to follow. So, short answer to you, Felicitas, get that IUD out and change the method. You are bleeding far too much and too long. Short answer. The extended version. So, first of all, organic products, they don't have any chemicals in them. So I have read a little bit about how they can decrease the inflammation in the uterus and the cervix. So for some people, they could have a change in bleeding pattern, although not anything significant from what I know of. The other problem with it is there's just no evidence, no real research about it. So I can't give you a educated response about the use of organic products. As far as the reusable cups, like the Diva cup, that's the only one I know about really. You definitely cut down on your waste, but as far as I know, you might have a little change in how terrible cramps are just because, once again, it's an organic product. Like there's no chemicals there. But then again, there's just no evidence to back any of that up. So I can't give you a really good educated response about any of that stuff. I will say the copper IUD, just like I talked about earlier, the number one side effect that I hear and is even listed, things that I have to talk to my patients about, is heavy and painful bleeding and prolonged bleeding. Most women that experience that past the first year will have no change in those symptoms. So unfortunately, I don't think that you're going to have any better luck with the copper IUD. Now, once again, the copper IUD works wonders for some people, but not everyone. So I'm not saying anything bad about the Paragard. I have some patients that absolutely love it, but it does not work well for everybody. So just so you can understand a little bit, so the IUD actually has a copper wire wrapped around the base and also both of on the T side. So IUDs kind of look like this, and it has copper around here and also around the top. So the whole purpose of the copper is it releases these copper ions that actually create an inflammatory response in the uterus, which helps prevent pregnancy. It's also very toxic to sperm, so that's also how it helps prevent pregnancy. Woohoo! So it's great for that. But the inflammatory response is what can cause these symptoms. So it causes inflammation of all that tissue, which increases the chemical response of the prostaglandins, which I'm not trying to get too in depth here, but so those prostaglandins is what can create that terrible cramping, and it's all to do with the copper. So like I said earlier, I had that same exact response. I was missing work. I was feeling like I was about to pass out at times. I know that you are so concerned about the risk of breast cancer. I had the same concern, but I had to learn more because I couldn't deal with it anymore. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the risk of breast cancer. And I can talk more in depth about risks of breast cancer and breast cancer itself in another episode. I'm going to just very short talk about it here. So your risk of breast cancer is, there's a lot of things that can adjust that risk, but a family history is one of them. Age of those family members. So if you've had multiple family members under the age of 50 with that when they were first diagnosed, that can be a little higher risk. Also, the number of family members. So if you've had mom, aunt, grandma especially if it's on both sides or just all on one side, that can most definitely affect it as well. And the type of breast cancer. Some are specifically linked genetically, but not all of them are. If you have a family member with breast cancer, like I said, you are automatically just a little bit of a higher risk. So the use of hormones is not found to modify that risk, especially progesterone-only methods. Pregnancy, and this is from the CDC, the pregnancy could actually be a higher risk of breast cancer than the use of some contraceptives. So just a little something to think about with that. So something else in the CDC, and I do want to include this link because obviously I didn't do this research myself, so I'm including this link below. But so the CDC has this really cool thing. It's called medical eligibility criteria for use of contraceptives. So basically what it is this huge graph, and it has explanations of all of it as well. Of different methods of contraception, hormonal, non-hormonal, with all these different medical conditions and medications as well. So basically it's scored from 1 to 4. And I tell you, there is every medical condition you can think of on this chart. So scale of 1 to 4. 1 is the least risk, 4 is the highest risk. Actually, 4 is you can't use this method at all. So family history of breast cancer carries a 1 for every type of contraceptive, all hormonal types. So that means there is absolutely no restriction for use of any hormonal contraceptive. So I want you to check out that link, Felicitas, because I think it'll give you a little bit of peace knowing that there is research to back up that family risk of breast cancer doesn't mean that you can't use something. So I have to say this. You have to be comfortable with your choice. I can't make a choice for you, and you have to make an informed decision about it. So I'm hoping that I'm giving you the tools, the links, to make that informed decision, because if you're not comfortable with what you're doing, you don't want to make the change if you're not going to be comfortable with it. But I also think having prolonged periods, as long as you're having them, like I said earlier, some people just have heavy periods, but it's not healthy for you, especially if it changed after we put in the Paragard. So Mirena, good for 5 years. You've already had an IUD placed. It's very similar to having the Paragard placed. And it should significantly change the amount of bleeding you're having, how long it is, and how horrible your cramps are. I also think, and this is just me thinking, like, what would I also do for my patients? I think you really need to be tested for anemia. You may even need to be put on some iron for a while, just because that much bleeding can significantly change your hemoglobin level, and you could become anemic just because of how much bleeding you're having with your periods. So I really think you should check in with your GYN, discuss your options a little bit further. That's my suggestion for you. Also, as far as the breast cancer concerns, you have to get your mammograms when they're suggested for you. It's a little bit different since you have a family history. If you haven't already discussed that with your GYN, I most definitely would be. Make sure you're doing self-breast exams every month. Really, you're just looking for changes in breast tissue, or all of a sudden there's redness and there wasn't redness there before, or any kind of nipple discharge that's never normal. Well, it can be normal, but if you're not pregnant, I would be getting it checked out, basically. Also, if you haven't had genetic testing, I would definitely look into it. I did that after my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer, and it made me feel a lot better and understand my risk of cancer a little bit better. So I really hope I hope I answered your question. If I didn't, or you want a little bit more info, please reach out to me. I am more than happy to address a little bit further. So my next episode is going to address anxiety, depression, and postpartum depression. I am not a mental health counselor, but I am more than willing to address your concerns and give you any kind of advice that you might have. I have quite a bit of personal experience with anxiety and depression, and quite a bit of professional experience, especially with postpartum depression, because of the effects of hormones and a woman's mental health. So it's something I'm very passionate about, and I would love to address anything that you guys throw at me. So please send me questions, Facebook, Instagram, through my website. If you want to be anonymous, you can just send me a private message. Just make sure you say, please keep me anonymous. I'm more than happy to talk about anything that you guys want to talk about. But if you're not comfortable with me using your name, that's fine. I won't. I promise. I still need people to sign up on my website for this Amazon gift card. I have a $50 Amazon gift card that I want to give away, but I need 100 subscribers on my website. I have a ton of subscribers on Facebook, but please go to the website and sign up, because I want you to know when anything changes. And I want to give away this gift card, or else I'm just going to use it myself. No, I'm just kidding. I won't use it myself. I will give it away, I promise. Also, if you're on the website, please fill out my short survey. I still want to know what kind of things you guys want me to talk about, especially as I gain new watchers, listeners. I want to know more about you, so I know who I'm talking to here. I really appreciate all of the support I've gotten so far, and please share with friends and family, anybody you think that would be interested in listening. And please give me feedback on this episode. If there's things that I need to change, just let me know, because I'm only going to get better if you guys give me some feedback. So thank you so much for watching today, And I hope you have a good one. See you later.